Hello, this is a daily report for Tuesday, January 11th here in Korea. Debate over vaccine passes continues worldwide, and we touch upon this controversial matter later on in the program. Here first is a global pandemic update with our Kwon So-ah. So let's begin here on the local front then.
Let's do that, Sunny. We've got a slight rise in COVID-19 infections this Tuesday, but not all too much. 3,097 cases were tallied as of 12 a.m. this Tuesday, which includes a little over 2,800 domestic transmissions and 284 from abroad. Now, that is a record high. And if we include the Cheonhae unit cluster infection that happened in July last year, it is the second highest ever caseload from abroad. Now, if we move over to the latest developments, we see that for the past 5 days, we've had infections in the 3,000s. And also compared to last Tuesday, it is a similar caseload. Now, moving over to our map, we've got ups and downs depending on where in the country. Gyeonggi-do province and Incheon saw an increase in the capital region, while Seoul has experienced a drop in cases this Tuesday. Now, there's been also a drop in the number of patients that are currently in severe or critical condition, that is, which stands at 780 as of 12 a.m. this Tuesday. And in total, Korea has now over 670,400 infections and a death toll at 6,114, with 43 people having lost their lives due to this virus in the past day. On to our vaccination figures. 86.5% of the nation's population has now received at least one COVID-19 shot, and 84.1% a second one or are completely vaccinated. And also more than 41%, 41.8% to be exact, have now received their additional dose or booster shot. Let's move over to the international figures. There's been a very high number of daily new infections as of 12 p.m. Korea time. Over 3 million new cases were added in the span of a day, and 6,116 people were reported to have lost their lives. Let's move over to the specific figures here in some other parts of the world. The U.S. is seeing record high numbers of hospitalizations. In fact, on Monday local time, over 132,600 people were hospitalized in the country. And then we've got the UK with over 140,000 cases in just a day. And also Italy has also reported over 100,000 in just a day, whereas Turkey, meanwhile, with some 65,000 new cases, has hit the 10 million milestone in its total caseload. And those are the general updates that I have for now, but I'll see you back in a bit. Sunny?
All right, so thank you for the global tallies over the past 24 hours. Now, back here in the country, challenges remain amid the possible rampant outbreak of Omicron on the local front in the near future. For that, I have Choi Min-jung in the studio with me. Min-jung, welcome back.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Right, then let's begin with the latest on the Omicron front here in the country.
Right, Omicron currently accounts for 12.5% of daily cases, and it has been rapidly spreading over the past 3 weeks. Korea has added more than 1,000 Omicron cases in the latest 1 week period alone, and with that, the country has reported a total of more than 2,300 Omicron cases as of Monday. Health authorities are saying that the variant will become the most dominant strain within this month. To prepare for a potential surge in cases, authorities are planning to expand our testing capacity from the current 750,000 to 850,000. They're also considering plans to prioritize PCR testing for the elderly, nursing home workers, and people at higher risk of becoming severely ill.
Right, and on a slightly encouraging note, Min-jung, I understand Korea's current COVID-19 alert level has been lowered.
That's right, Sunny. Authorities on Monday bumped down the country's COVID-19 alert level to moderate for the first time in 7 weeks. This is down by 2 notches after it remained at very high for 6 consecutive weeks. By region, the capital area was at moderate risk last week, while regions outside the Greater Seoul area were at low risk. And despite the downgrade, health authorities are still on high alert due to the spread of Omicron, as I mentioned earlier, and also the upcoming Korean Lunar New Year holiday, Seollal.
Right. But the fate of our current prevention guidelines will depend on these factors, right?
Right. Authorities will announce on Friday South Korea's new social distancing measures. And there are wide expectations that there will be an easing of restrictions. Currently, social gatherings are limited to 4 people, and most businesses must close at 9 p.m. New guidelines are set to be in effect next Monday as the current measures are due to expire on Sunday. Watchers are expecting officials to ease some of our current rules as daily infections have fallen in recent days thanks to our booster campaign and vaccine pass mandates. But again, authorities remain cautious as they are bracing for a rebound in cases with the spread of Omicron and the upcoming long holiday.
Minjung, one more question for now. What has been the public response to the vaccine pass requirement at large retail stores that began on Monday?
Like you just said, Monday was the first day of vaccine passes being required at department stores and large supermarkets. And as expected, there was some anger and confusion among various people. And some people were not aware of the new rules, while others found it difficult to use mobile apps to show proof of vaccination.
People are really confused. There are delays as some elderly find it difficult to utilize QR codes.
Overall, public reactions were mixed between those supporting the mandate to curb the spread of the virus and others who were opposed, especially among the unvaccinated.
I think it's a measure that can stabilize the current resurgence. I don't think it's too much.
Some people can't get vaccinated because of fear over vaccine side effects or health issues. It will affect their daily lives if they can't go to supermarkets.
Right, now that is a concern and something we'll be discussing in our panel discussion later on the program. All right, Minjung, thank you for now. Stay with us for the broader talks.
Thank you.
Right, up next, I have Soa back at the desk with the latest government remarks on Korea's COVID-19 situation. Now, Soa, let's pick up where I left off with Minjung. Authorities have renewed their support of vaccine passes then.
Right, Sunny. So the government has called on the nation's public to actively participate in what's currently seen as the primary solution in getting the country back to its return to normalcy scheme, which is vaccinations and vaccine verification. So replying to a question, though, on whether authorities are putting more weight on the vaccine pass system than on social distancing, an official had this to say.
Our current social distancing guidelines and vaccine pass measures are designed to complement one another. Proof of vaccinations are meant to best enable social and economic activities for those who've been inoculated, while also providing room for the unvaccinated to access as many venues as the situation will allow if they submit negative PCR test results.
Regarding these negative test results, meanwhile, Park made it clear at Tuesday's briefing that Korea is currently not looking into making unvaccinated citizens pay for their screenings, like in some other countries, if it's just for the sake of having a negative test result to get into specific venues. Also, regardless of whether social distancing measures are eased or not, basic antivirus guidelines are not being taken lightly, she stressed, as they remain in effect at all kinds of venues, even at those where the vaccine pass system is not applied at. And that means, for instance, ventilation as well as disinfection at specific venues. And whether there will be an easing of the current social distancing measures, she had a vague answer because she did mention that there are many key indices that showed improvement in the COVID-19 situation in Korea. However, the risk of the Omicron variant still lingers. So authorities and experts will discuss the measures on Wednesday at the Committee for Return to Normalcy, and an announcement is expected on Friday.
Right, and staying with transmission trends here, so I hear the number of elderly patients is falling while that of teenage patients is rising. Tell us more.
So that was also a concern that President Moon Jae-in had addressed at a meeting with senior aides a day ago, as he called on a fast review of an expansion of vaccination for children. For now, the government government says that Korea has no vaccine to be given to kids aged below 12, but given that 5 to 11-year-olds are being inoculated abroad, analyses are in progress. And if the nation's drug ministry does give the green light in the future, the government will draw up a specific plan for a rollout. What officials are stressing for now is the need to vaccinate those that are eligible among the younger population, as minors currently account for close to 30% of infections.
Right, and so also one more question there. What's the latest on Korea's introduction of oral drugs against COVID-19?
Well, Sunny, as promised last week, the government will announce details on the antiviral pills, with the government in its briefing earlier saying that this may come as early as tomorrow or Wednesday. This is to include information on distribution locations and schedules, as well as the first patients that should be subject to receiving this treatment. The first batch of Pfizer's antiviral pill Paxlovid for around 20,000 people is reportedly to arrive in Korea on Thursday. The country has a pre-purchase contract with Pfizer as well as Merck's oral treatment, enough for 762,000 and 242,000 patients, respectively. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety said on Monday that there may be some restrictions to the prescription of oral pills against the coronavirus for patients that take other medicine due to existing health conditions such as angina, irregular pulse, or gout. And along with oral treatment development, also intravenous drugs are in process of being developed, and they may also become a new game changer in the antiviral market. Now, Novartis, which is a multinational pharmaceutical corporation, said that it is seeking a fast approval for its drug, which has showed the risks of hospitalizations and deaths from COVID-19 by 78% in a phase 2 clinical trial.
Right, that is good to know. Meanwhile, on the vaccine front, I understand an Omicron targeted vaccine, Minjung, will be available in spring this year. Tell us about that.
Right. Pfizer CEO on Monday announced that its Omicron-specific vaccine will be ready by March. He also revealed that the company has already started manufacturing the doses. The vaccine will be made available to target other variants as well. However, he added that it's still unclear whether an Omicron-tailored vaccine is needed, but the firm wants to keep a ready inventory in case of future demand. The CEO added that the current vaccines, especially after taking the booster shot, is effective against hospitalizations and severe diseases. Meanwhile, Moderna CEO also said that its boosters specifically targeting Omicron will soon enter clinical trials. The vaccine is set to be ready by fall this year.
And so what would this mean to Korea? Will we benefit from the Omicron-targeted vaccines once they are ready is a question that has also been raised at the earlier government briefing. So let's take a listen to a reply from an official.
When it comes an Omicron-specific vaccine, we already had in mind the possibility of a new variant emerging when negotiating the purchase of mRNA vaccines in the first place. The contract we signed includes agreements on the purchase of modified vaccines in case they're needed against a new variant.
Now, those who are about to get their additional doses may wonder if they should wait for those new vaccines because the Omicron variant is expected to become the dominant strain here in the country. Regarding that, an official said if you are eligible for a third dose right now, you should first get vaccinated with the available vaccine.
I see. All right, so as always, thank you very much for the coverage. Minjung, thank you. See you on Wednesday.
Thank you.
In our headlines at this hour, North Korea appears to have test-launched yet another missile into the East Sea. Now, this is according to a statement by South Korea's chiefs of staff that added the launch was detected at 7:27 on this Tuesday morning local time. Intelligence authorities from Seoul and Washington are reportedly carrying out a detailed analysis. The Blue House, for its part, has voiced, quote, strong regret following a National Security Council meeting to address the latest launch. Back on Wednesday last week, North Korea testified what it claims was a hypersonic missile. On the international front, marathon talks between Washington and Moscow in Geneva on Monday failed to bridge the gap over their differences in security concerns. Our Kim Hyo-sun has details.
The U.S. and Russia made little progress on Monday, narrowing their differences during their highly anticipated security talks in Geneva. Despite huddling together for nearly 8 hours, the two countries remain far from reaching an agreement on each other's security concerns. During the talks, which Russian officials described as difficult, long, but very professional, they underscored Russia has no plans to invade Ukraine. Russia's deputy foreign minister also said that despite Moscow highlighting the need to see some flexibility from NATO, the U.S. did not provide such an assurance.
I don't think you will expect me saying otherwise than to confirm that this is one of the areas where we have the greatest difference of views with the U.S. The U.S. suggests that there is no way that Russia or whoever else may have a say on those type of issues. But we underscore that for us it's absolutely mandatory to make sure that Ukraine never ever becomes member of NATO.
U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman stressed that no one will be allowed to undermine NATO's open door policy, adding Washington will not forego bilateral cooperation with countries that want to work with the U.S. Both sides remain pessimistic on expectations for a diplomatic breakthrough. The U.S. said it was 8 hours of discussions rather than a negotiation. Moscow also said the main questions remain up in the air. The talks, the first in a series that will take place across Europe this week, revolved around Kremlin's demands for security guarantees from Western powers. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Also, on a rather sobering note, a record number of Koreans tapped into their retirement savings last year as one apparent indication of the financial hardships amid the pandemic. Our Kim Hyun-sung has more.
Candlelights spelling out help. Local business owners gathered in front of the National Assembly on Monday night to protest against the COVID-19 business curbs that have crippled their livelihoods for the past 2 years. According to a report by the Korean Statistical Information Service on Tuesday, 7,110 people in 2020 withdrew savings from their individual retirement plan early, as they were filing for bankruptcy or economic rehabilitation. That's the most withdrawals since 2015. The amounts withdrawn also spiked to a new level, more than $75,006,000 US, double the withdrawals made in 2015. The increase in people pulling out money out of their retirement savings early is an indicator of how many people are struggling due to the pandemic. In response to these cries for help, the Finance Ministry has hinted that it might revise how withdrawals from retirement funds are taxed. They have hinted that if a person withdraws from their retirement plan due to inevitable circumstances or unforeseen social disasters like COVID-19, they may be eligible for lower taxes on the withdrawn money. The government has said that the coming changes will be to stabilize the livelihoods of the pandemic's hardest hit. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Over in Las Vegas, innovations by Korean tech students reportedly gained quite a bit of attention at this year's Consumer Electronics Show, which ended late last week. Here's our Yoon-jin.
The user dances in front of a laptop, and in a few clicks, their movement is digitized, which is then easily converted into an animation character using pose extraction and deep learning technology. This startup company was launched last year by 2 juniors at the Pohang University of Science and Technology. After raising $2.56 million in a pre-Series A funding last year, Plask debuted at this year's CES.
Plask runs on a technology that captures and digitizes the user's movements. So it's a product that makes it much easier, faster, and cheaper to produce movies or create games and animations.
This is Huggy, an air-inflated smart vest that provides psychological stability to people that need assistance from caregivers. Psychological indicators incorporated in the vest send any abnormal biometric signals, which not only notifies the caregivers, but also gives the wearer relief by inflating the vest. This product received recognition for its potential practical use in a variety of fields, becoming a CES Innovation Awards honoree.
This is our first exhibition overseas, which I think will be a stepping stone for global expansion. We will continue our efforts to further develop our vests so that they can help more people around the world who need care.
Also featured at this year's CES were 10 companies from KAIST and 13 companies from Postec. Dubbed the Eureka Park for Startups, CES served as a platform for startup companies of South Korean university students to showcase their ideas and technology. Ian-jin, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. Serbian tennis star Novak Djokovic won a court battle on Monday, allowing him to stay in Australia to play in the Australian Open. However, the Australian government may be preparing for a second set, as it may threaten to cancel his visa for the second time. Shortly after the Federal Circuit Court reinstated Djokovic's visa, after initially deciding he didn't meet the criteria for an exemption to an entry requirement that all non-citizens be fully vaccinated, government lawyer Christopher Tran told the judge that the Minister for Immigration, Citizenship, Migrant Services and Multicultural Affairs will consider whether to exercise a personal power of cancellation. While sources say the minister has yet to make any decision yet, such a decision would mean the Serbian could again face deportation and could miss the Australian Open, which begins next Monday. The heavily indebted property firm China Evergrande Group has moved out of its headquarters in Shenzhen to another property in the city in order to cut costs. The company issued a statement on Monday after a Chinese media outlet reported that the company had moved to its headquarters from Shenzhen to nearby Guangzhou. The company says it has moved out of Shenzhen's Excellence Center, a property owned by another company, to a building that Evergrande owns in the city. No further details on the new setup were provided. Evergrande is the world's most indebted developer, currently struggling to repay more than $300 billion in liabilities, including nearly $20 billion in offshore bonds deemed to be in cross default by rating agencies last month after it defaulted. By Monday afternoon, the company's logo had been partially removed on one side of the Excellence Center. Evergrande was founded in Guangzhou, but moved to Shenzhen in 2017. Massive floods around South Africa's eastern coast city of East London have killed at least 10 people and left hundreds without homes since the weekend. Local media footage showed rivers bursting through banks, leaving roads inundated. It also reported that hundreds of homes had been washed away in the iron roof informal settlements just outside the city. Scientists predict that climate change is the cause of the worsening floods and droughts along South Africa's eastern coastline. The deadly flood comes despite the country's Department of Environment drawing up a plan for the country to adapt to climate change in 2019, which included strengthening its preparedness to respond more quickly to weather disasters and help victims recover. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The start of the new year means the start of new resolutions. Our Chun Song-cho is out on location to a special place that has become a popular venue for wish-making. Song-cho, welcome.
Good afternoon, Sunny.
Right, so where are you greeting us from exactly?
So I'm at the Seoul Tower atop Namsan Mountain. It is one of the most popular tourist attractions in Seoul. If Paris has its iconic Eiffel Tower, New York has the Statue of Liberty, and Seoul has the Seoul Tower, Namsan Tower. It is located right in the middle of the city, and even if you've never been to Seoul, you must have seen this place somewhere, somehow. Why? Because it is a very iconic filming location for many Korean dramas and shows. I mean, just take a look at a breathtaking view right behind me. I mean, you can get a stunning panoramic view of the entire city surrounded by beautiful nature. But this place it's not just famous and popular for tourists, but also many locals come here for hiking and even for a light stroll because it is a great place geographically. It is located right at the heart of the city, like I said. I actually live quite near here, and this place is hands down one of my favorite places to go for a walk with my dog. It is a very pleasant and relaxing walk around here. And you can just forget about the daily rush and stress from the metropolis when you come here, as the entire city stretches out before you. But this city, this Seoul Tower is also famous for something else. It is none other than these locks of love. I mean, look at these thousands and thousands of padlocks. So we're on the roof terrace right now, where people come to seal their romantic promises by hanging locks on railings and fences like this with their initials and names written on them. So it is basically a romantic pilgrimage for those who want to declare eternal love. Let's look at some of the messages right here. So I think it's a couple, Sugun and Jungsu. Let's love each other for a long time and live with our baby for a long time. I love you. Oh, this is so sweet. Let's see. And this one has, I think this person just got hired to his company. He got a new job. And let's see. This is like a message of hope. Our family, let's have a 대박 year in 2022. All right, it was written in 2021. I'm feeling a little pang of jealousy right now. But even if you come here without your plus ones, like me right now, you can still scribble something on the padlocks, right? Like messages of hope and for the new year and wishes. So I cannot miss out on that opportunity, of course. So I got this padlock and a pen prepared for today for everyone. All right, so I'm going to write something. I'm going to write, let's see. I'm going to write happy 2022, the daily report. I'm sorry about my handwriting because it's so cold out here. My fingers are almost frozen. All right, so I'm going to hang this lock. Let's see. Okay, I think this is a good place. Right? Ooh. Oh, all right. I'm going to do it right here. It's locked forever. Happy 22. The daily report. Wow. I feel like exciting things are going to happen for all of the viewers out there and for our staff members and our crew and everyone. All right, so I'm full of anticipation, hope for the new year. You should definitely do this also if you get a chance. Maybe you should even go up the observation platform atop the tower. There are numerous ways to get here. There is a long stairway you can walk up, which is about 20 to 30-minute trek. You can take the cable car or even the bus. For more details, you can go on the Seoul Tower's official website. This has been Chun Sung-cho reporting live, and back to Sunny in the studio.
All right, Sung-cho, thank you for that report and thank you for the well wishes. COVID-19 vaccine pass requirements are triggering much controversy across the globe. Here in Korea, legal dispute is ongoing, while over in Europe, public protests are underway. For more, I have Professor Cho Hee-kyung from Hongik University. Professor Cho, it's a pleasure to see you again.
It's good to see you too.
I also have Professor David Kwak from Sooncheng University. Welcome back, Professor Kwak.
Good afternoon.
Right, Professor Cho, we'll start with you then. Perhaps we can start actually with a few words on the legal debate over vaccine passes here in the country.
There are currently two live lawsuits that are ongoing before the courts. One has been brought mostly by parents of students against this administrative order, which essentially mandates people who don't have vaccine passes, i.e. people who are not fully vaccinated, from being able to use places like hagwons, academies, study cafes, even schools. But that was actually not due to come into effect until March. But the parents, the order has already been made, and the parents who felt that this was not quite the right thing to do for the students challenged the order, and the administrative court actually issued an injunction suspending the operation of the order until the courts had a chance to hear the full arguments by both sides and for the judgment of the court to be issued. So I think it will be some days or perhaps a couple of weeks before we will actually hear the judgment. The government has actually immediately challenged the injunction, and so that hearing is ongoing. Mm-hmm. The second lawsuit has been brought by, I think there's about 1,000 claimants, mostly small and medium-sized businesses, particularly those who have been affected by the social distancing orders and closures of shops and also early closing hours and so forth. But it also includes some medical professionals who do not necessarily agree with the institution of vaccine passes. As you know, we've had this vaccine pass come into effect from, I think, yesterday. So we cannot visit, even supermarkets without actually, showing a vaccine pass. And so that's under a constitutional challenge now.
Right. And Professor Kwak, you've been quite vocal about your opposition to vaccine mandates, but you do support vaccinations themselves. Now, as a medical professional, what are your thoughts on the need for vaccine passes?
Well, I guess I'm going to repeat myself once again here. Even though I do think that, and professionally speaking as well, the vaccines are necessary for our own protection. It has a definite proof that it protects us from having severe forms of the disease, let alone dying from the disease. So I do think it's necessary, and I think all people around the world should be educated and informed well enough that they would decide to receive the vaccines for their own benefit. However, the matter of mandate on it should be separate from the scientific proof or even the information we currently have, because with a mandate, I think there also needs to be a responsibility taken by the party that mandates the other. And just recently, I've been seeing a lot of patients coming into the clinic really suffering through mild side effects, not the severe forms or something that puts them in a hospital bed, but rather a chronic, severe pain that they've been having for the past couple of months ever since they received vaccines. I'm not saying vaccines cause these mild symptoms to everyone, but there are numerous cases where people have a sort of a symptom which is not clearly explained, and that can be pinpointed to the vaccination, but will be strong enough that these people would decide not to go ahead with further schedule of vaccines. And I'm in a position still informing that the vaccines still would further benefit them, but I cannot make them decide for their own to be mandated to receive the vaccine. So that's where my position comes from, where I say, even though vaccines are still necessary to protect us, to all of us, I still don't think that it should be mandated.
Right, and before we delve further into the local situation, let's take a moment to venture beyond national borders over to France, where tens of thousands took to the streets this past weekend to denounce a proposed law that demands proof of vaccination to dine out, to travel on intercity trains and to attend cultural events. For more, I have Clovis Casali live on the line. It's a pleasure to have you on, Clovis.
Good morning.
Right, now let's begin with some background behind this latest hardline stance with regard to COVID-19 vaccine passes by the government.
Well, basically, there are rising and worrying cases here in France. For yesterday alone, we're talking 93,000 new cases of COVID-19. So what does that mean? Well, the government, the French government and the President Emmanuel Macron, of course, wants to reduce the pressure on hospitals. Make sure that some people who need vital treatment for cancer or other will actually get a place in hospital, because hospitals are not yet saturated, but depending on the areas of France, it's a very serious problem. So what is the French government doing? Well, they're trying to increase furthermore the level of vaccination in the country, this in order to reduce the number of hospitalizations. And as you said, there were demonstrations. Very tricky context here. A lot of opposition in France, with a few words from the French President Emmanuel Macron saying he wants to emmerde the ones who do not get vaccinated. I'm not going to specifically translate what that word means, but it's rather a rude way of saying that he wants to bother as much as possible those who are not yet vaccinated.
Right, and what has been the general response, that is, to this tough stance by the government and to Emmanuel Macron's rather colloquial way of saying he seeks to, is it irritate or annoy those who are not vaccinated?
Absolutely, and those are not words that Emmanuel Macron usually uses. Well, last weekend, around 100,000 people all across France demonstrating, gathering on the streets in order to protest against this new vaccine mandate, the vaccine pass, as we call it here, replacing the previous sanitary pass. Well, it means that people will have to get vaccinated here in the country in order to go to shops, take part in various entertainment, to be able to go to stadiums, and so on. There are also rules that mean that basically people can get checked, not just their passes, but also ID papers, because what you've been getting here is people who are opposed to these measures just getting a fake vaccine pass or one of someone else, and not having to prove their identity at the same time. So it proved pretty unsuccessful for those who are so opposed to these measures. Why are they opposed? Because they say these measures are curbing their freedom, liberties, that it's completely unfair. A lot of people, a lot of those people believe that vaccines don't work, and that especially younger people should not be subjected to a vaccination, because they are not at risk of developing serious forms of COVID-19. So that's their argument. You also have parents saying that children should not be forced to get vaccinated, that there is no point, they are not at risk. Worth pointing out that France has a very good level of vaccination. We're talking around 75% of the people here fully vaccinated, but clearly the government wants to do more in order always to reduce the number of people in hospital for COVID-19 reasons.
Right. So staying with that, the lower house, I understand, of the parliament has passed the controversial bill, and the government hopes to implement it in mid-January, the 15th of January to be precise. But I hear the Senate may delay the process. What more can you tell us, Clovis?
The Senate might delay the process, just the way the National Assembly, which is the lower chamber, but the more important one, did in previous days. It seems very unlikely that the bill will not pass in the Senate. It will go through. It will be a matter of days. Yesterday, the government spokesperson, Gabriel Attal, said that we spoke of the date of January 15th. It might be the week of January 17th, because some minor changes to the bill might be introduced regarding the age. For instance, they're saying that maybe only children over the age of 16 on school outings will have to prove a vaccine mandate, that it might depend on the level of infections, depending on the regions of France. There might be localized, regionalized, if you will, minor changes, but the core essence of the bill will very much stay the same, and it will be introduced in the coming days. Basically, the just strengthening of measures, more controls in order to be sure that more French people get vaccinated. And all of this, of course, in a context of presidential campaign. You might be aware, that there's a very important ballot coming up in France here in April, the French presidential election. Emmanuel Macron standing for re-election, and all of these measures, his handling of the COVID-19 crisis, will be under scrutiny and will be, of course, at the heart of the campaign.
Right, Clovis, one very final quick question there. Do the unvaccinated in France have the option of handing a negative PCR test to access dining establishments and cultural events, as is the case here in Korea?
Yes, but with the new bill, that will change in most cases. There are some exceptions. For instance, if you need to go and see a parent, for instance, who's in a critical medical condition, there are various exemptions in that respect, and also that is basically, it will also depend on how security forces implement these measures. But in some specific cases, negative PCR tests will be accepted, but widely for most gatherings, for most activities, supermarkets and so on, you will need to show a vaccination. It might be 1 dose depending on the company. It might be 2 doses depending, of course, on the vaccine company, the type of vaccine that you're using.
I see. All right, Clovis, thank you for making the time to join us live at this very early hour at your end with your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, back here on the local front, Professor Cho, as you mentioned earlier this month, a Seoul Administrative Court called for the holding off of vaccine pass requirements for teenagers to access private venues of academic purposes. Do tell us a bit about the legal grounds for this ruling and its potential implications.
So the Administrative Court found that the vaccine pass mandate was not proven to be necessary or proportionate in this instance. What the order saying that people who don't have vaccine pass cannot access these educational facilities is doing is in fact infringing one of the basic rights that are protected by Constitution, which is a right to education. But before that, Clovis mentioned in his report that in France they call vaccine pass mandate simply vaccine mandate. But there's actually a little bit of difference, because obviously a vaccine pass mandate means that you have to have a vaccine pass. But in order to have a vaccine pass, you obviously need to be vaccinated. So basically what a vaccine pass mandate does is to mandate being vaccinated via backdoor. So the government is not saying to you, you have to be vaccinated. It's not making it vaccination compulsory, but they are making vaccine pass compulsory to do all these everyday things like going for your grocery shopping, going to school, attending academies, going to study cafes. So all of those daily activities that you would do in a normal daily life, those are now requiring these vaccine passes. And so it's really impinging and infringing on our movements, our right to lead a normal daily life with human dignity. If you are being denied access to grocery shopping, this is basically denying you right to life. You can't eat, you can't live, right? And for students, as I said, right to education. And one of the most fundamental rights that we have is right to our bodies, our bodily freedom. And if you are being jabbed by a needle with some foreign fluid into your body, that's basically an assault and battery and causing grievous bodily harm unless you give your informed consent. This is what Professor Kwak mentioned earlier. And so this is why informed consent is so necessary. And when these basic rights clash. So we have the right to health and the government's duty to ensure public welfare and health versus individuals' right to all these freedoms and rights that they should enjoy under the Constitution. The impingement or the curtailment of those basic rights should be necessary and proportionate to the risk that we are facing. And the court found that the administrative order with regard to the vaccine pass mandate for educational facilities simply was not proportionate, and they didn't think it was necessary at this point in time, which is why they issued injunction.
Right, and staying with that, Professor Jo, what looks to be the impact of this latest order by the court on future legal disputes over vaccine passes?
So, because we don't have a system of legal precedents in our country, the administrative court's decision is not going to be binding on any other courts. Also because it's a lower court, it's a trial court rather than an appeals court. Their decisions don't really have any binding force. But I have heard quite a few medical professionals expressing concern that given this injunction issued by the court, there is a danger that other such administrative orders that are issued by the government to try to protect public health will be much more easily challenged by people in the future, and the courts may be much more willing and ready to suspend those orders pending, full hearing and decision, and that's going to essentially impact on the efficacy and the effectiveness of these various measures that they're trying to take for public health. But I would say that this particular administrative order that's been issued really wasn't thought through very carefully, and also it was possibly a bit too premature. And so this may actually motivate the government to think a little bit more carefully and consider things in a more broad manner before issuing those orders.
Right. And staying with what Professor Cho has just mentioned, Professor Kwak, as a medical professional yourself, there are concerns, of course, that this latest order by the court, as Professor Cho has mentioned, may, broadly speaking, cast doubt on the government's containment strategy. What are your thoughts?
Well, so once again, I want to iterate that there needs to be a clear distinction of necessity of vaccines against the mandates. Even though the vaccines do clearly do benefits to everybody who it's inoculated to, the mandate itself, as Professor Jo already mentioned, the proportion of the benefits that we would get from mandating everyone to have received vaccines before entering certain venues is, I'm quite doubtful that it is going to benefit all of us in the manner that it'll stop the spreading to other people. There have been numerous studies that actually prove those vaccinated are less likely to transmit to others, but still, this stays more of a protection to people from not going into the severe forms or dying from it, but rather than transmitting to other people, especially when we're having issues like breakthrough cases, even for those who received booster shots. And that's, I think, is going to become even more common once the Omicron hits our country. So looking even forward, I think mandating everyone to show passes because they received vaccines, as opposed to receiving vaccines for our own protection, needs to be clearly distinctive.
Right, because nobody likes to be told what to do, right? Professor Jo, as part of efforts now to appease current public discontent, authorities are looking to expand the list of vaccine exemptions. How do you respond to this move?
How effective is that going to be? Because no list of exemptions is ever going to be complete. And it's really, they're coming up with these ad hoc measures to try to quell discontent. And this, again, shows how they haven't really thought this through. And once again, I come back to the point that what they're essentially doing is mandating vaccine, but through a back door. And so this is what they want to do. Then they should really pass a law that mandates vaccine and actually, set out in a much more great detail about what the exemptions are going to be, what the government is going to do if people do suffer side effects, rather than these kind of ad hoc schemes that they implement now. And also, as Professor Kwak mentioned earlier, it's very difficult to prove cause and effect between the side effects that you experience and the vaccines themselves. So what's the government going to do, if in those cases? So those are the kind of things that they really need to be debated, discussed, and looked at. And we don't really have sufficient data, I think, for the government to do this. And this is why I think they're going through this kind of backdoor way of, mandating a vaccine pass rather than mandating vaccines, but that's really not the right way.
Right, and against the legal proceedings that are underway, Professor Kwak, there are some people who've actually postponed their booster shots as they await the results of these legal proceedings. What are your thoughts on the postponement of booster shots? We currently have 41%, I believe, of the population that has received a booster shot.
So that's for the more why we need to make that clear distinction between these vaccine passes and its protection that is going to protect us. So if I may share a little bit of personal experiences with my colleagues and whatnot, we are clearly seeing clinical symptoms of these people who have also been vaccinated with certain types of vaccines to even still get sicker. So those people who has not received, let's say, booster shots with an mRNA type of vaccine, but received a certain type of vaccines before, even with their completion, they still do get very sick and can also be sick enough to get admitted to ICU. So booster shots, currently speaking, as a medical doctor, which is still needed. Booster shots, with the waning of prior completion of vaccines, the waning of immunity, that is, they're not going to be big enough or powerful enough to protect you further when after a certain time of period has passed. So the booster shots now has become necessary, but that doesn't still mean that it's necessary to go into different daily activities. But booster shot, medically speaking, is still definitely needed. And I would once again strongly recommend to all those who are watching this to receive their booster shots when the time comes to protect their own selves. Quite separate from the governmental mandate.
Right, of course. Professor Zhou, I understand this might be a tough question, but given the current scenario here in the country, what do you propose perhaps to tackle this issue that we're having with the public, or with the members of the public that is, and the government with regard to vaccine passes?
So I think we have to challenge the assumption that vaccine passes are necessary, which seems to be the assumption that government has already made by mandating vaccine pass. Professor Kwak has already given numerous examples, but what does vaccine pass actually add, apart from simply making it easier to verify or identify who has been vaccinated and who hasn't? But what is to say that those people who have been vaccinated, as opposed to those who have been unvaccinated but are tested negative or have actually had COVID, that they are at greater risk of infecting other people? And on top of that, we also have breakthrough infections, right? So even if you are vaccinated, that doesn't actually exempt you from exposed to risk or exposing other people to risk. So what does vaccine pass really add? And also, in different circumstances and different environments, the risk of being infected is so different, in schools, in cafes, in restaurants, as opposed to in supermarkets and outdoor venues. And so you really need to have the appropriate measure of protection for that particular environment, rather than saying, oh, vaccine pass, you're through. No vaccine pass, you can't come in. That is simply not the right way to manage this. And in fact, vaccine pass could be detrimental to having proper measures to protect ourselves, because people might be lulled into false sense of security, thinking, oh, I've been vaccinated, I have my vaccine pass, and so I'm okay to go everywhere. I don't need a mask, even, for example. So I would say the government really has to rethink their policy regarding vaccine pass and go back to the drawing board.
Right. Professor Zhou, as always, thank you very much for your insights. Professor Kwak, thank you for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Right, well, that is all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Report. Do join us again tomorrow. That would be Wednesday. Thank you for now.